Thank you, Jennifer. So, good morning, live streamers, as well as our congregation. So we are now going out onto the web. A number of years ago, I did a memorial service for a woman, and I will never, ever forget the story, nor what her husband shared with me about her and about how it came to be. She passed at 49 of cancer, and she did not fight her disease. She had had a dad who had died at 49 of cancer also. Now, the frightening thing for me was that my dad died at 49 of cancer also. So I was really connected in a very strange way. She didn't try Western medicine. She had seen her father sit in a hospital bed in the living room for 2 years. And she said, I'm not going to go that way. So she tried non-conventional homeopathy, and within just a few short months, she asked her husband one night if he would take her to the balcony to see the full moon. And when she saw the full moon, they prayed together in the light and the love of God, and he carried her back and put her in her bed in the living room. He went to shower and prepare for the evening, and when he returned, she had let go of her body. She had moved on. When he sat before me, sharing and preparing the memorial service, he said, she played her part well. She played her part well. I will never forget. And when I don't play my part well, that voice comes up in me that reminds me something greater than I am is having this experience that I call my human reality. And sometimes I effort and struggle and try to get it to go a certain direction because I think that's the way it's supposed to be. And yet, when I let go, my life is a little bit like silly putty. It kind of resumes back to its own normal state. And my personality, which all psychologists, there's only one thing that all psychologists agree about, and that is by the time you're 6, your personality is fixed. Fixed. So my grandchildren already have fixed personalities. Then the one that's spicy will always be spicy. Then the one that's ball fixed and wants to be in the ballpark and have a ball game will always probably be guided by that athletic sports being outside. I'm worried about the one that's glued to his electronics, because does that mean for the rest of his life I'm going to have to snatch that thing away simply to get a kiss or to have a conversation or even to introduce the idea of dinner? And then there's the one that just, who are you? Who are you that the Spirit made perfectly to come and play the part? So I didn't know where to start the story of how we got here 10 years ago. And there's a part of me that wanted to go back to, well, I was born in 1951. Oh, no, we don't need to start back there. I'm going to be 64 in 2 months, so that's a long, long time ago. So do we start even at 10 years ago? Well, it didn't actually just sort of happened, so maybe it needs to start a little bit before that. I found my way into a religious science church because a lot of people were going to that religious science church. Now, what research tells us today is that people go to church because people go to church. So when they poll people from mega churches, the number one thing that people from mega churches say is that they go to that church because other people do. They don't go because of the theology. They don't go because of the denomination. They don't go because of the minister. They go because other people do. So I went because other people were going. And I was among the 1,000 people to be in that church, to join that church, and therefore I got given a Science of Mind text. That was kind of a big deal, and I jumped right into classes, and the church went from 1,000 to 3,000 very, very quickly, and it was very exciting. It was in Huntington Beach. I absolutely loved the minister. I was 35. I had a lot of layers to let go of. However, I'm not sure I really was doing the work there. I started really quickly wanting to be a leader in this movement, but I was not. It's taken years of absorbing, of catching the consciousness. And I know that that's a part of the part that I have come to play. So I rushed through the School of Ministry, doubling up the classes I could take, and I'm a really good student. I get good grades, and so it was easy for me to just powerhouse through. Now, never mind that you need the consciousness to lead a community. It's not just an education, it's the consciousness. So I powered through the School of Ministry. I graduated in a reasonable amount of time, and then I went to work for Senior Concerns, where I was a social worker for seniors, and I waited until I got called to a church. I candidated at a couple of churches, and candidating is where you stand up and sell your wares and they vote on you and decide whether or not you're going to be their minister. And they don't get to see how you run a church, they just get to see how you present a message. And I kept doing my prayer work, and I saw the North Hollywood church. It was beautiful. I couldn't figure out how to get there. In my meditation, I could see the church. I just could never get there. One of the things that was a blessing out of my very good friend, the Reverend Dr. Mark Vieira, being the minister there, is I always had a fantasy that I would preach in a tent. Every time I saw a revival tent, I would say, oh, I just so want to do that. Well, when they were in a construction phase, they put a tent in their parking lot, and he went away on vacation, and I got to guest speak there and do 3 services in August in 110 heat on the asphalt with little misters so that everybody out there was comfortable, and I was just melting down. I did 3 services that Sunday. I was like, okay, been there, done that. Don't have to do that again. So I had a church for 11 years. I didn't actually candidate it because I began to say, and I ran into somebody who was a minister in our movement, and I said, I hate the candidating process. And he said, well, do it another way. And I said, what do you mean, do it another way? And he said, well, you've got the consciousness, just do it another way. So I actually was hired as a staff minister and then went to associate minister. And then when the senior minister left, I just stepped in and led my first church for 11 years. Then one day, I didn't like something. I wasn't reading my part. I was acting more my normal, natural self when I said, I quit. And it's kind of like that when I say it. I quit. And I'm not a threatening person. I mean it when I say it. I quit. So I was done with that church. Then my mentor's church opened, which was no longer a mega church, but it was a tiny church now. And they called me to be their minister. Now, I wasn't there very long. Somebody asked me, is something being done to you, or are you doing something? You know, if you're a really good religious scientist, you'd have to say, I'm doing something, nothing's done to me. I wasn't there very long before I started to think, I don't like it here. I'm not having a good time. This isn't fun. So I asked everybody who'd take my dog when I expired, because I started to think, I'm not thriving here. And then, like I did with the previous marriage, I said, how long is reasonable before you can say you quit? And I decided that about 18 months was a reasonable amount of time. So both a marriage I quit at 18 months, and another job I quit at 18 months. And with just a great sense of, like, I'm free, I quit. And I walked away. I went up north, and I stayed there for about 10 days and watched emails pour in asking me to come back. There was a group of people from that church that wanted me to start a church here. Now, in the School of Ministry, being a really good student, I slept through every discussion of starting a church. I slept through how to start a church. That was not something I was going to do. And if you want to make God laugh, tell her what your plans are for today and see how that all goes. Because almost everything that I've said I'm never going to do is one of the things, or some of the things, that I've ended up doing. So this was one of them. When I came back, I had brand new grandchildren. They're 10. They're the same age as this church. I had brand new grandchildren. And I spent some time in kind of the question about where was I supposed to be? Now, that might have been part of the part that I came to play, that I had to discover, and I had to take that journey again and again. And what I know is that in this spiritual community, yes, you can crank that on. Thank you. I see he's looking at it. Turn it on. Thank you. That's the air for those of you who are out in the world. Okay, so what did I say? Where was I? Hello? Bird flu? Deciding, questioning. Now, I'm not the kind of person, and actually I've heard some literature about, to absolutely fervently know something is a terrorist. And really, we can look out and see some religious zealots that are terrorists in their religious understanding. My religious understanding was this question. And one of the things I love about religious science is that this is a place not to come and get your questions answered, but to get your answers questioned. And so all of my answers have been questioned. When I was in a previous church, I said, shame on you for being a church. You should not even call yourself that if you can't love and be in the flow. When I started this spiritual community, they said, what are you going to call it? And I said, this name is going to stay forever. And what came to mind was Spiritual Renewal. Because every time we go to the Spirit, we have the capacity to be renewed, to be restored, to have a new connection that allows us to go out in the world and be greater than we ever were before. Now, we are an unaffiliated church. The denomination changed its name from Religious Science, and I am a religious science minister in good standing with the Center for Spiritual Living, and they changed their names to the Center for Spiritual Living after we were the Center for Spiritual Renewal. However, they didn't like the name Religious Science because it was too much like Scientology, so they changed their names. But the truth is, this is a religious science teaching. And I actually love the term. I don't have a problem with that because it keeps inviting us into the question, and science is so quickly catching up now that this really is a science and a religion. Ernest Holmes said that the way that it was a science is that you can run an experiment and you can change your mind about something and you can see if the result is a different experience. You can change your mind. You can tell an old story that you've told 1,000 times. My mother and father got divorced when I was 5. So from the time that I was 5 until I was 35, I had a very elaborate story about how my family had come apart and what had happened to me in the process. When I changed that story to that was a blessing, and it empowered everybody. And out of that blessing came a whole lot of other kids with other parents that became a part of my family. And I got a whole lot of other relationships. And my mother got empowered in other relationships that she wasn't really so empowered with in the relationship with my dad. So when we change the way we tell a story, watch how it changes your relationship, your experience, and it invites each of us into playing our part just a little bit better when we change the stories to everything that happened for our good. Now, it took me about 10 years, I'd have to say that hurt of losing my mentor's church, because that's the way that I saw that. I saw that I had her spiritual community, and I wasn't able to keep it. I didn't think that the part that I came to play was that was a piece of my journey, that wanting to know, should I be here or should I be there? When you are running a church and raising children, you have this, should I be home or should I be at work? Should I be home? When you're at home, you want to be at work. When you're at work, you want to be home. You're never where, you're just constantly feeling like, oh my gosh, the world's coming to an end. And I had 3 children when I first started, because it's 25 years that I have been leading a spiritual community. When I had children, there was a huge youth group. the largest youth group in the movement. Not the largest church, but the largest youth group. I didn't realize that when I started to say, I'm good with kids and they're grown, thank you, God, and I tell my grandchildren, I pray for your mother and father every day. And one time when my granddaughter was like, I miss my mother, I said, I miss your mother too. I pray for her, I want you to have her right now. So that, who would have thought that the consciousness of, I'm complete with kids would manifest as, I'm complete with kids. Consciousness, the growth of consciousness. This spiritual community, my personal mission statement is transforming lives through the teachings of the science of mind. Now, can you think back to when you first found this teaching that empowered you? Did it transform your life? Did it shift you from being a victim, thinking that things were done to you, to a place of empowerment? The cornerstones of the church are love, acceptance, forgiveness, and service. So in the beginning, they said, what are the cornerstones going to be? And okay, love. And when I thought yesterday about how I'm going to share the story of love with you, I wanted some grandiose story that would really depict, and I forget often how empowering it is to be told that you are made in the image and likeness of God, that God is not outside of you, but God is within you. That the idea that having a personal relationship with higher power allows you to hear guidance, allows you to know that you're partnered, allows you to know that your life is a bigger expression than the things that you have succeeded at or failed at up until this point. By the time I was 35, I was a ranting, raving mother. I can remember shrieking at my 3 children over the drop of a hat. I can remember thinking, I can't go on like this. The idea that love first needs to happen within me, that I don't earn the love of God, that I have the love of God. That because I have the love of God, I can allow that love to move in my being and be my blessing and emanate from me, or I can shut down on it and say it's not. But there's a creative principle that doesn't ever punish us for missing the mark. It punishes us by our consequences. So if I say I'm not getting enough, the creative medium can only give me more of not enough. And I can say that it doesn't work, but it's working by giving me what I put into it. So we don't have to worry about the law taking care of people. Liars attract liars. People who love God attract people who love God. People who make monumental shifts in their life attract other people who make shifts in their life. People who take responsibility for themselves attract people who aren't victims but take responsibility for themselves. Love is a powerful cornerstone of this spiritual community. It's not the cornerstone that is the romantic love. Sometimes we hear songs that are about people loving each other. And I believe that the universal love created the love of one another. So even if we have romantic or warm fuzzy or I'm fond of you kind of love for one another, the bigger picture of that love is that it comes from the love of God, which is unconditional and available any moment that either one of us say, yes, I accept. I have it within me, and I can experience it through sharing it. We did a big campaign a couple of years ago talking about Target. Do you show up at Target loving, kind, and compassionate? The Target at that time that I was going to, I always like to go out the garden store. Targets, you know what date that was, because Targets don't even have garden stores anymore. But at the garden store checkout was a disabled man. And I would watch the people in line respond to him. And he didn't automatically appear to be challenged. At first glance, he looked like he had all of his faculties and he could work just as fast and just as quickly as anybody else. So people would get angry when he didn't work just as fast as anybody else. And I began to think to myself, wow, spirituality Rubber meets the road when spirituality shows up at Target, when it shows up at, and because it's consciousness, I always get the line that's the slowest. Because it's consciousness, because I think I'm busy and important. So I always have the opportunity to practice peace and love when I'm in any line. I don't care, I'll get in, and the woman in front of me will have to count out her pennies, or she might have to get out her coupons, and they might have to have a discussion about whether that coupon is indeed being honored or not, and that will be the line that I will choose so that I can practice my spirituality in the market. Okay, the love of God is right here. The love of God is everywhere, and it's available to us when we say, I accept. I accept that I don't earn the love of God. If you had to earn it, all of us would fall short. All of us would miss the mark. All of us have the times that we say, we coulda, shoulda, mighta, woulda been different if fill in the blank. Acceptance is such a powerful part of this spiritual community. The world has evolved and grown, and we are seeing acceptance measured everywhere in the world to a greater degree. But acceptance for us is acceptance that there are other ways to practice our spirituality. There are other ways to go to God. There is acceptance of people that are unique and different. And there's the acceptance that I don't have to sell you on my way. I can know my way and be at peace, knowing this is the way that serves me. And I can be curious and accepting of you when you share the way that serves you. God came 7.2 billion times uniquely. Every single one of those persons has a story about how they cope with their life, about how they respond to the challenges that are in their life. I'm curious, just curious. It's amazing how many different ways, there's probably 7.2 billion ways to address an issue. So acceptance, accepting one another. It begins by accepting our spiritual community. It begins by accepting our family. Most of us want to think we got dropped off by the wrong group of people or there was, I read somewhere that they really do make mistakes giving the wrong babies. And I read a book about, the family that switched up a kid. It's a good book. Anyway, I wanted to think that I got switched up. I don't know what happened, The unfortunate part was I looked just exactly like everybody else, so that was a hard story to run. Acceptance of our family. I'm still working on the acceptance of my family. That means that they show up at a family event and they get contentious with one another. That's still something to accept. I want them to all have a good time. I want them to all be nice. That's me. Thank you, Fred. He's going over there. He's freezing, so he's going to go turn the air off. That's taking it in your own hands. Okay, so forgiveness. I have worked with a woman recently who could not forgive her father. He had been imprisoned. He had not been responsible for his children. His children had ended up in the system for a couple of years in a group home and in a couple of years in a foster home. And there was a lot of resentment about the way that dad did parenting. And so this young woman, she wanted more than anything in the world to be at peace, and she didn't understand that the key to that was to forgive and let go of her dad and the story that she held for him. She worked with that issue. She worked with me with what would it mean? How could I do? I don't accept his behavior, she kept saying. He was wrong. And I kept saying, if you want peace, forgive him. It's not punishing him. It's not doing anything to him that you think he shoulda, coulda done it differently. She one day decided to go and visit him. She sat before him and she said, I forgive you. He said, for what? He didn't even know. In his mind, he just didn't even know. It hadn't affected him. He didn't think that way about the whole thing. She said, I accept you. I love you. I know you did the best you could. He could hear the words. I know you did the best you could. She said, I love you. I forgive you. He passed right after that, almost as if he was waiting to hear that. I hear from this woman every time I sit with her. You taught me to forgive him. I'll never, ever, ever be more grateful for anything. Amazing that I could let that person go. Our forgiveness is an everyday practice. Jesus' teaching was a gazillion times a gazillion a day. And every once in a while I run into New Thought people who say, well, I already forgave that person. I don't know about you, but for me, when I forgive somebody, I go back and pick it up. And the way that looks to me of picking something up is I start rehearsing the drama again. Now, I recently have some information about the rehearsing of pain and drama. The physical pain, I think I might have shared this before, but the physical pain in your brain runs along a certain track, and emotional pain runs along the exact same track. The difference between physical pain and emotional pain is that nobody rehearses physical pain and everybody rehearses emotional pain. So what we do is we actually inflict that pain on ourselves every time we pick it up. So the invitation then is when I notice I'm holding a hot coal about something that happened in relationship with somebody, I can let it go by giving it to God, by giving it to a higher power, by surrendering it and knowing that maybe this too is a part of the part that I have come to play. Service is our ability to share what we have gotten, to share our understanding, not always to tell someone you're wrong because you don't know God's within you, you're wrong because you follow a different tradition. Ernest Holmes took the truth off of all of the 5 major religions of the world, and where there were similarities, he said this is a truth, and the truth teaching. And then some fundamentalists will say, you just pick what you like. It's like, I don't notice that anybody didn't just pick what they liked. Therefore, I think I am blessed to pick what I like as well. Now, if you believe in a God that's judgmental and critical, who would want to surrender and let go to that greater good? Because it's not a greater good. If you believe that God is punishing you for your missing the mark, and we use sin as missing the mark, an archery term. If you believe that God punishes you, you wouldn't want to let go and let God. But if you believe that only the consequences are going to come back to you of your behavior, then you would want to again and again begin this practice, which creates flexibility, which allows us to flow with our lives, which allows, like Tony's reading, to be that grateful space of greater good than I could ever imagine possible. God continues to give me more good when I let go than I ever imagined possible. There's a part of religious science that said I create my reality and I'm going to make happen what I want to have happen. And then there's another part of this teaching that says I accept what the universe gives me as an invitation for me to rise above appearances and to walk with a higher power in love and in compassion, in acceptance and forgiveness. When I am on the mark and do the work, it rushes in and meets me and carries me forth. Ernest Holmes' favorite story was about the prodigal son, and the part that he loved the most in telling that story as the founder of this teaching was that when you turn to God, God turns to you and rushes to greet you and lift you up. God bless all of you for being a part of this spiritual community. I've been accused from time to time of being grateful to a fault. I don't think that's possible. I am so blessed to be a part of this spiritual community, to be here today 10 years later. God bless you for choosing church. I invite you to take this moment and turn within. We open our hearts and minds together, knowing that we are in our right place, in the center of our being. Knowing right here in this center is that aspect of the whole which knows itself as perfect and divine, which has created a human experience for lessons and blessings, for empowerment through community with one another, to grow us through our effort to experience us as our fullness. The Spirit is right here, right now, in each one of us. It knows the truth of who we are. It knows our personality. It knows where we effort and struggle. And it also knows the infinite. That Christ principle is centered in our being. It loves us individually, and it is impersonal and loves the universe. When we rise up in consciousness, we go first through the Christ self to the universal self, that which knows everything. And so we are blessed on our journey, each one of us, looking at the role, at the part that we came to play, and asking ourselves, do I have the courage to try to be that part to the best of my ability? And when I say yes, to God be the glory, and when I miss the mark, it's simply to brush myself off and to go again. Thank you, God, for each one of you, for this spiritual home. We are blessed to be together, and so it is. Amen.